Okay, welcome back to another Helix video. Thanks for tuning in. I had a question after my last video to do a multi-channel patch and one in which there were multiple items assigned to one foot switch. Multi-channel patch meaning that you have essentially at least two channels of amp sounds, let's say clean and dirty, in one patch. And it's actually pretty easy to accomplish this. I thought about just replying in a post on Facebook, but then I started thinking about it, and there's actually a few different ways to accomplish the same goal. So I thought it was enough here to kind of make a fun video, so I decided to go ahead and do that. So that's what this video is going to address. I'm going to use the amp and cab block for the sake of simplicity here. Rather than having an amp block and cab block split out and all this stuff, because we're basically just like my last video. I want to say this isn't about, I'm not going to be really worried about tone per se. I'm just going to pick a clean amp and a dirty amp, show you how to switch between them, show you how to set it up, the routing and all that sort of stuff, and you can kind of go from there on getting the tones you're looking for. Starting out here, let's use a twin, Fender Twin model, very clean. And for distortion, let's do this nice German amp. Essentially, these are in line. You don't want them ever to both be on, because that would be one amp feeding into another, which is never really a good thing, never tonally what you're looking for. What I do want to do is assign a foot switch to toggle between these two. So I come in here to foot switch assign. Again, you can do this on the unit. It's easier for me to use the editor when making these videos. I'm going to use foot switch number 1. Come over here to this amp, foot switch number 1. Quite simply now, foot switch number 1 toggles between the two. When you're assigning the foot switch, you just want to make sure they're in opposite states. One is on, one is off, so that when you toggle, they swap. Which is exactly what you're looking for. I'm going to throw a little reverb on the end here, just for the sake of having a little bit of space in the sound, have it not sound too dry. Just a personal preference. Okay, so now I'm going to start with the clean amp. Hit the switch. And it's that simple. You know, if you want to do just a channel switching patch, you can do it just as simply as that. That took 2 minutes to set up. Of course, you're going to want to find the exact amps you want to use and maybe tweak them a little bit and tune them in. But I mean, there you go. It's nothing difficult about setting that up. You still have some room here for some post effects. You have some room here for some pre effects. So not much to it there. That's the simple way. We'll call that method number 1. Now, let's say that you want to do this, but you want to have different effects per amp. There's certain effects you want on the clean amp that you don't want on the dirty amp, and vice versa. Of course, Helix makes that pretty easy. We're just going to drag this amp down into the bottom path. We want to make sure the split happens before the other amp, right? So we don't want one amp feeding into another. Right now it's merging after the reverb. I'm just going to pull that over here just so the reverb affects everything. So what we've got is, by default, it's a Y split, meaning a 50-50 split. And we do have to make a change here, because just having the amps toggle on and off, the signal is still going to flow through here, meaning that you're going to get a dry signal come through with the distorted signal. And then when I flip it, you're going to get a dry signal down here coming through with the clean sound. That's not what you want. You don't want the dry signal coming through at all. You want it to be either or. Right off the top of my head, there's a couple ways you can deal with this problem. One is to keep the foot switch doing what it's doing, flipping between these two, and then change this from a Y to an AB and use the controller sign to use and have the same foot switch 1, which is turning on and off each amp. Also change the routing, to where when the clean amp is on, it's all the way to the A. When the dirty amp is on, it's all the way to the B. Certainly that works. Another way you could do it is have both amps stay on, and instead of having a foot switch turn the amps on and off, actually have the foot switch change the volume of the amps. So instead of foot switch assign, I'm going to come over to controller assign. I'm going to choose the volume parameter, foot switch number 1 again. Minimum value 0, maximum, let's just say 8.5. I'm going to come to this amp and I'm going to do the exact opposite. Volume, foot switch 1. Minimum is going to be 8.5. Maximum is going to be 0. Okay, so what I just did was basically set it to where the foot switch is going to turn the volume down on one while simultaneously turning it up on the other amp. So tonally speaking, we're right back where we were, where the foot switch now goes from dirty to clean. One other thing, and this may have, I was playing with this patch before, this may have remembered it did. Whenever this splits, if you've got one amp turned all the way down, you're kind of losing a little bit of signal because one path is turned down. The way to fix that is come over to the merge block, and I'd already been playing around with this. So I already had these boosted, but you can boost A level and B level up just a little bit to compensate for the fact that your signal is going to be a little bit lower due to this split. I hope that makes sense. Like I said, basically you're losing some of your signal, so when you come back to the merge, by boosting it, you're making up for whatever you're losing. Usually 3 to 4 or 5 decibels at the most kind of covers any of that. So why would we do this? What's the advantage? We now have some pre-slots for each amp and some post slots for each amp. So if we wanted to do different effects routing for dirty and clean, different delay settings or reverb settings or drive or modulation, anything, you now have 2 paths. Now, so far we're still using, basically path 1A, 1B. So we're using one DSP chip to do all this. We haven't touched the second one. So let's say you do this method and you start adding effects and you run out of DSP. One thing you can do is basically copy this block, paste it down here, then get rid of the one up here and make sure we tell it that we want to have signal coming in. So now it's the same thing. However, we're letting 2 different DSP chips handle the audio processing. So that will allow us to have more effects and more flexibility in each path. And honestly, if you're going to separate them out rather than have them in line and toggle it like the very first method, I would recommend going ahead and breaking them out into path 1 and path 2 for the sake of having the most flexibility possible with DSP power. So I'll just say this is method number 2, or if you want to count having them in both in one, method number 2, and this will be method number 3, having path 1 and path 2. But like I said, this way gives you a little more flexibility with horsepower, so you're not having to fight with running out of juice at the top by having, because the amp and cab is going to take up quite a bit of DSP. So because I copied and pasted, it should have remembered the controller sign, which it did. So everything's still the same. When I hit the switch, it changes the volume on one amp to the other. Same goal is accomplished. So those are kind of basically 2 different ways you can do the multi-channel thing. Now I'm going to show you one other way. I'm just going to do away with this bottom path, and I'm going to make sure and turn this off so we're not getting any dry signal. Some amps have the ability to do, you know, a pretty good clean and a pretty good distorted sound all within 1 amp. So I'm a pretty big matchless fan. So let's go to the matchless. Only thing I'm going to do is change the mic model on the cabinet. I like a ribbon mic. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to have the okay, so it's a nice clean sound, pretty straightforward. What we're going to do, instead of changing to a different amp block, we're going to use the controller assigned to quote unquote change channels on this amp. And what that means is we're going to change the settings on the amp to make it sound like a different channel of the amp. So what we're going to do, again, we're going to use well, first of all, okay, channel 1 drive, that's going to control our amount of distortion. I'm going to stick with foot switch 1. Minimum value, I think I had this on like 2, on the thereabouts. Maximum value, let's say around 9. Let's really crank it. I'm going to go ahead and speculate that the volume is going to jump a bit when we crank up the gain. So let's have minimum value, which is where we're clean at about 9. And then maximum value when we crank the drive up about 6.5. Just kind of guessing here. So let's see what that sounds like. We'll go from clean to dirty. So it works. Like I said, I was kind of guessing at the volume levels. They weren't perfect. You probably would also want to change the EQ a little bit when you jump from clean to distortion. Same way we did with the other parameters. Just say pick the treble and assign the foot switch 1 and set the minimum value, maximum value. So, I think you can assign up to like 8 parameters per foot switch. I think that's right. So you can do quite a bit with using 1 amp that has a range of tones in it and using 1 foot switch to change several parameters at one time. So, there's another way to do a quote-unquote multi-channel setup. And this way, you only have 1 amp. You don't have to use multiple blocks, multiple paths. You just have to assign the changes that you want to the foot switch. So anyway, I hope that's helpful. There's 3 or 4 different ways of kind of playing around with that and doing that. And so I hope this gives you some ideas. And again, you'll need to find the amp models you like, tune them in, tweak them the way you like, all that sort of stuff. But this is just kind of showing you how to put the building blocks together. I really think it's important to learn how to build patches from scratch and how to do these things, because then you know exactly how these things are put together. You know the components of the presets. You learn how to make your tone, how to go for your sound, and you're not relying on presets or other people's patches. You can kind of, it gives you more freedom. You can do exactly what you want to do. Not saying that, starting with someone else's preset's a bad thing, but the more knowledge you have, the better. It's never a bad thing. So anyway, hope this helps. Hope it was a fun video for you guys. And if you have any other questions, just let me know. Thanks.